I'm Alexis Morgan, 28 years old, and my life was completely upended last spring. I had been living in my family home, paying rent, building my graphic design career, when my parents delivered a bombshell. You have 48 to get your stuff out. Your sister owns that house now. The shock of betrayal from the people I trusted most nearly broke me. My sister Megan stood behind them, smirking. No warning, no discussion, just 48 to vacate the place I called home. Before I continue this rollercoaster story, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever dealt with family betrayal, and stick around to see how I turned this nightmare into the best revenge. To understand the magnitude of what happened, you need to know a bit about my family. My parents, Robert and Catherine Morgan, have lived in the same two-story colonial in Seattle for over 30 years. The house originally belonged to my dad's parents, who left it to him when they moved to Florida for retirement. It's a beautiful 4-bedroom home in a great neighborhood with mature trees and that sense of established community you can't find in newer developments. For the past 4 years, I'd been living in my childhood bedroom while paying my parents' $800 monthly rent. This arrangement started after I graduated from design school. The job market was tough, and I was drowning in student loans. My parents suggested I move back home to save money while starting my career. It seemed like a win-win situation. They got some extra income, and I got affordable housing in an expensive city while building my graphic design business. My relationship with my parents had always been what I'd call adequately functional. They provided for me growing up, attended my school events, and generally did what parents are supposed to do. There wasn't an abundance of emotional warmth, but they weren't cruel either. They were just present. Dad spent most of his career as an engineer at Boeing before retiring 2 years ago. Mom taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school and was always more focused on her students than her own children. Then there's my sister Megan. 4 years older than me, Megan was always the golden child in our family. She checked all the boxes that impressed our parents. Straight A student, law school graduate, corporate attorney by 26, married to another attorney at 28. While I was creative and artistic, Megan was practical and ambitious in ways my parents understood and valued. The favoritism wasn't always over, but it was constant. Megan got a car for her 60th birthday. I got driving lessons. Megan's law school was fully funded by my parents. I got student loans with a small parental contribution. Despite this dynamic, I'd made peace with my place in the family hierarchy. I was building my graphic design business, gaining more clients each month, and slowly paying down my debt. I had plans to move out within a year when I could afford a decent apartment without roommates. I wasn't just freeloading during those 4 years, either. Beyond my monthly rent, I'd invested in improving the house. I replaced the outdated appliances in the kitchen, renovated the main floor bathroom, and repainted several rooms, all with my own money. I figured these improvements would help when my parents eventually decided to sell the place. The family dynamic shifted about 8 months ago when Megan's perfect marriage imploded. Her husband David had been having an affair with his paralegal, a cliché Megan found humiliating. The divorce proceedings were ugly and drained her emotionally. My parents immediately rallied around her, as expected. Sunday dinners became forums for Megan to vent about David's betrayal while my parents nodded sympathetically. I tried to be supportive too, though Megan and I had never been particularly close. What I didn't realize was how completely the divorce would reshape our family's priorities. My parents began spending more time at Megan's downtown condo, bringing her home-cooked meals and offering endless emotional support. Meanwhile, they became increasingly critical of my career choices, suggesting that my unstable, artsy job was why I couldn't afford my own place yet. These comments stung, especially as my business was actually doing well. I just wasn't flaunting my success. The last normal family interaction we had was a Sunday dinner 1 week before the eviction notice. Megan came over, looking more put together than she had in months. Mom made her famous pot roast. Dad opened a bottle of expensive red wine. The conversation was mostly about Megan's finalized divorce settlement and how she was ready for a fresh start. I remember thinking it was nice to see her recovering and mentioned that a client had referred me for bid project with a tech startup. Nobody acknowledged my news. They just continued discussing Megan's plans to rebuild her life. Looking back, there were signs that something was brewing. My mom asked if I had thought about finding my own place soon, as she served dessert. Dad mentioned that the housing market was getting better for buyers. Megan asked oddly specific questions about my schedule for the coming week. I didn't connect these dots until it was too late, assuming they were just their usual hints about my independence. I never imagined that a week later, my entire life would be upended by the people I thought I could trust most in the world. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I woke up at 6:30, went for my usual run around the neighborhood, showered, and made a smoothie before heading to my room to start work. I had a client meeting scheduled for 10:00 a.m. and needed to finalize some logo concepts. Around 9:15, I heard a knock on my bedroom door. "Alexis, your father and I need to speak with you downstairs," Mom said, her voice oddly formal. I saved my work and headed down to the living room, where both my parents sat stiffly on the sofa. The atmosphere immediately felt wrong, like walking into a performance review rather than a family conversation. "Have a seat," Dad said, gesturing to the armchair across from them. I sat down, my stomach already knotting with anxiety. "What's going on?" My father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have made a decision about the house, and we need to inform you of some changes." Mom jumped in, her t-shirt voice in full effect. "We've decided to transfer ownership of the house to Megan. She'll be moving in by the end of the week." The words didn't make sense at first. "What do you mean? You're selling the house to Megan?" "Not selling," Dad corrected. "Giving. It's a gift to help her get back on her feet after the divorce." I felt like I'd been punched. "But I live here, I pay rent." "That arrangement was always temporary, Alexis," Mom said. "You've been here 4 years now. It's time for you to find your own place." The room seemed to tilt sideways as the implications sank in. "How much notice do I have?" My parents exchanged a look that chilled me. "Megan needs to move in right away," Dad said. "Her condo sold faster than expected." "What does right away mean exactly?" I asked, my voice rising. "You have 48 to remove your belongings," Mom stated flatly. "Megan will start moving in on Thursday." 48? That's insane. I pay rent here, I have tenant rights. I was standing now, though I didn't remember getting up. Dad's face hardened. "This is a family matter, not a business arrangement. Megan needs support right now, she's family too." "And I'm not," I shot back, tears threatening. "Of course you are," Mom said with a sigh. "But you're in a better position. You're not recovering from a divorce. Megan needs a fresh start." "What about my fresh start? I've been saving for a place, but I need time to find something. You can't just throw me out." "We're not throwing you out," Dad said, making air quotes. "We're asking you to respect the family's decision. Megan is in a fragile state. This house has always meant more to her anyway." That statement knocked the wind out of me. The house had been my childhood home too, but apparently, my connection to it was deemed less valuable than Megan's. "I've paid rent for 4 years," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've put thousands of dollars into improving this house. Doesn't that count for anything?" Mom had the decency to look uncomfortable, but Dad remained unmoved. "Those improvements were your choice. We didn't ask for them. You said you loved the new kitchen appliances. You bragged to your friends about the bathroom renovation." "Alexis," Mom cut in, "getting upset won't change things. The decision is made. Megan will own the house as of tomorrow when we sign the papers." "Tomorrow?" I was practically shouting now. "You're doing this tomorrow, and you're only telling me today? How long have you been planning this?" Neither answered directly, which told me everything. This wasn't a sudden decision. They'd been planning it for weeks, possibly months. "You need to start packing," Dad said, standing up to indicate the conversation was over. "If you need boxes, there are some in the garage from when we helped Megan move." Of course they had helped Megan move. Of course there were boxes ready. Of course this whole thing had been orchestrated behind my back. "What if I refuse to leave?" I challenged, desperation making me bold. Dad's expression darkened. "Then we'll have your things moved for you. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Alexis. It's done. We expect you to handle this maturely," Mom added. "Megan's going through enough without family drama." Family drama, as if I was creating a problem rather than responding to one thrust upon me. The injustice was breathtaking. "I have a client meeting in 30 minutes, I said numbly. "I can't just drop everything and pack my entire life in 2 days." "You'll need to make arrangements," Dad said dismissively. "This is happening whether you're ready or not. 48, Alexis. Then the locks will be changed." They both stood and walked out of the living room, leaving me alone with the ruins of my security and trust scattered around me. I heard Dad's study door close and Mom's footsteps heading to the kitchen as if they'd just discussed a minor schedule change rather than demolishing my life. I sat frozen in that armchair for what felt like, though my phone showed only minutes had passed. Somehow, I pulled myself together enough to email my client and reschedule our meeting, citing a family emergency. The phrase felt bitterly inadequate. After my parents dropped their bombshell and left me sitting alone in the living room, the shock gave way to waves of emotion so intense I could barely breathe. I stumbled back upstairs to my room and closed the door, leaning against it as my legs threatened to give way. The tears came then, hot, angry tears that seemed endless. How could they do this? 4 years of paying rent, contributing to the household, improving the property, all dismissed as if it meant nothing. And the callous way they delivered the news, as if evicting their daughter was as routine as discussing dinner plan. I collapsed onto my bed, grabbed my phone with shaking hands, and called Rachel, my best friend since college. "They're kicking me out," I sobbed when she answered. "My parents are giving the house to Megan and I have 2 days to leave." "What? Slow down, Lex. What happened?" Rachel's voice was a lifeline of sanity. I poured out the whole story, each detail sounding more surreal as I spoke it aloud. "Those manipulative," Rachel cut herself off. "Okay, first things first. You can stay with me until you figure things out. I'll help you pack and move. We'll get through this." Rachel's immediate offer of support was the first moment I felt like I might survive this betrayal. She lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment with her boyfriend Tyler, but they had a spare room they used as an office. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. "Are you sure? I don't know how long it would be," I said, wiping my eyes. "For as long as you need. Tyler will understand. This is an emergency, Lex." After talking with Rachel, I tried to pull myself together enough to start planning. I had a successful but still growing business, some savings but not enough for first and last month's rent plus security deposit on a decent place in Seattle's insane housing market. I had furniture to move, clients to manage, and a lifetime of belongings to sort through all while processing the emotional earthquake that had just leveled my world. That night was the longest of my life. Sleep was impossible as my mind raced between practical concerns and emotional devastation. I scrolled through apartment listings until my eyes burned, each one more depressing or unaffordable than the last. I replayed every family interaction from the past few months, looking for signs I should have seen. I cycled through grief, rage, disbelief, and paralyzing anxiety. The cruelest part was how memories kept surfacing. Dad teaching me to ride a bike in the driveway, Mom and I planting the garden boxes when I was 10, family game nights in the living room during power outages. Each happy memory now felt tainted, like photographs that had been altered to remove someone. Had any of it been real? Had I always been the outsider and now clearly was? Around 4 a.m., I finally gave up on sleep and started sorting through my closet. If I had 48, I couldn't waste a single minute. By the time dawn broke, I had 3 piles forming: essentials to take to Rachel's, items to put in storage, and things to sell or donate. The process was both practical and excruciating. Each object held memories, and each decision felt like another small loss. When I heard my parents moving around downstairs around 7 a.m., I decided to make one last attempt at reason. I waited until I heard my father pour his morning coffee, then went downstairs to find him reading the newspaper at the kitchen table as if it were any normal day. "Dad," I said, my voice raw from crying, "can we please talk about this? There has to be a better solution. I just need more time to find a place and save for deposits." He barely looked up. "We've made our decision, Alexis. Megan needs this house more than you do right now." "How can you say that? I literally have nowhere to go." "You're resourceful. You'll figure it out." His tone was dismissive, almost bored. "At least give me a month, please, just enough time to find someplace decent. Megan's already given notice at her condo. The new owners take possession next week." He finally looked at me, his expression unmoved by my obvious distress. "This isn't up for negotiation." Mom entered the kitchen then, hesitating slightly when she saw me. "Alexis, have you started packing?" The casual cruelty of the question broke something in me. "How can you both sleep at night? I'm your daughter too." "Don't be dramatic," Mom sighed. "People move all the time. You're 28, not 18. It's not about moving, it's about how you're doing it. It's about treating me like I don't matter." Dad set down his newspaper. That's enough. We expect the house to be in good condition when you leave. No damage out of spite. The implication that I would vandalize my childhood home was the final insult. I was about to respond when my phone rang, Megan's name flashing on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hey sis, her voice dripped with false sweetness. Mom and Dad told me they talked to you. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing with the move. How do you think I'm doing, Megan? I hissed, walking out of the kitchen for privacy. You're taking my home? Not taking, receiving as a gift, she corrected. Besides, I've always loved this house more than you. Remember how you couldn't wait to leave for college while I cried for weeks? That was 10 years ago. I've been living here, paying rent, improving the place. Playing house, you mean? Megan interrupted. Come on, Alexis. You had to know this was temporary. I need a fresh start after what David did to me, and Mom and Dad agree this is the perfect solution. Perfect for you, maybe. What about me? You'll land on your feet. You always do. She paused, then added with unmistakable smugness, I'm thinking of turning your room into a home office, or maybe a yoga studio. What color do you think would look good in there? The calculated cruelty of her words confirmed what I had suspected. Megan hadn't just accepted my parents' offer, she had orchestrated this entire situation. By eviction wasn't a side effect of her needs, it was the point. How long have you been planning this? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Planning? I don't know what you mean. Cut the crap, Megan. This didn't happen overnight. When did you convince Mom and Dad to give you the house? She hesitated just long enough. It was their idea. Liar. She sighed dramatically. Fine. I mentioned after the divorce that I might need a fresh start somewhere with good memories instead of bad ones. They suggested the family home might be perfect since you've been there so long already. So this has been in the works for months, while I've been paying rent and buying appliances. Not my fault you didn't see the writing on the wall, sis. Anyway, I need to know when exactly you'll be out on Thursday. I have movers scheduled and... I hung up on her. My hand was shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. The full picture was finally clear. This wasn't just family favoritism, it was a calculated plan to benefit Megan at my expense. And my parents had been willing participants. In that moment, something changed inside me. The hurt and betrayal crystallized into a cold, clear resolve. I would leave as ordered, but this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After the call with Megan, I knew I needed help not just with moving, but with understanding my options. Despite the emotional chaos, a clear thought emerged. I had been paying rent. That made me a tenant, regardless of family ties. And tenants have rights. I called the only lawyer I knew personally, Brandon Williams, who had hired me to design his firm's branding materials last year. He wasn't a housing attorney, but he might know someone who... Brandon, I need legal advice about a tenant situation. It's urgent, I explained when he answered. What's going on, Alexis? His professional tone was reassuring amid my turmoil. I gave him the abbreviated version. 4 years of paying rent, sudden 48 for eviction notice, family complications. First of all, what they're doing is illegal, Brandon said firmly. In Washington state, even month-to-month tenants are entitled to at least 20 days notice before eviction, and that's assuming there's a valid reason. Being your parents doesn't exempt them from tenant law. His words validated what I'd suspected but couldn't articulate through my emotional haze. So I could fight this, absolutely. We could file for an emergency injunction today to stop the eviction. Do you have proof of rental payments, a formal agreement? I have bank statements showing monthly transfers to their account for 4 years. No written agreement though, it was a family arrangement. That's still sufficient. Regular payments establish a landlord-tenant relationship in the eyes of the law. For a moment, I was tempted. The thought of legally forcing my parents to let me stay was briefly satisfying, but then I considered the reality. Remaining in a hostile household, the ongoing tension, the permanent damage to already fractured relationships. What if I don't want to stay? I asked. What if I want to leave but be compensated for the improvements I've made to the property and the illegal eviction? Brandon was quiet for a moment. That's a different approach, but potentially more practical. Do you have documentation of these improvements? Receipts for everything. New kitchen appliances, bathroom renovation, paint, fixtures close to $22,000 worth over 4 years. Perfect. Here's what I suggest. Document everything before you leave. Take photos of the improvements. Gather all receipts. Create a detailed inventory. We'll send a formal demand letter after you're settled elsewhere. This strategy resonated with me. I didn't want to stay where I wasn't wanted, but I refused to be exploited. I can do that. One more thing, Brandon added. Record any further conversations with your parents about this situation. Washington is a two-party consent state for recordings, but keep notes of what's said, and don't sign anything they give you. Armed with legal knowledge and a plan, I felt marginally more in control. I called Rachel next to coordinate the move, then reached out to a storage facility to reserve a unit. By noon, I had a framework for the next 48 hours. Document everything, pack essentials for Rachel's, store the rest, and collect evidence for potential legal action. I worked methodically through my room, photographing everything before packing it. I located and organized all receipts for house improvements, made copies of bank statements showing rent payments, and compiled text messages where my parents had acknowledged or thanked me for renovations. Rachel arrived that evening with her boyfriend Tyler and their truck. My parents watched from the kitchen window as we loaded my first round of belongings, but didn't come out to help or even speak to us. Their silence was another small cruelty in a growing collection. Your parents are really doing this, Rachel said incredulously as we carried boxes to the truck. I mean, I believed you, but seeing them just washing us like this. They've made their choice, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Megan always comes first, at least now it's out in the open. The next morning brought a new humiliation. I was carefully removing the framed photos from my wall when I heard voices downstairs. Megan had arrived early. My bedroom door opened without a knock, and there she stood with an interior designer in tow. Oh good, you're making progress, Megan said, surveying my half-packed room. This is Justine. She's helping me reimagine the space. Justine looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing the tension. I can come back another time. No need, Megan insisted. Alexis is leaving tomorrow anyway. I'm thinking this wall would be perfect for built-in bookshelves, don't you think? They proceeded to discuss color schemes and furniture placement as if I weren't there, as if my belongings weren't still filling the room. I continued packing in silence, refusing to give Megan the satisfaction of seeing me break down again. After they finally left, I found a small measure of vindication. While looking for packaging tape in Dad's study, I discovered the property transfer documents. The house wasn't being gifted to Megan as they'd claimed. She was buying it for significantly below market value. The discovery didn't change my situation, but it exposed another layer of deception. By Thursday morning, my deadline, I had moved my essential belongings to Rachel's apartment and the rest to storage. All that remained was a final walkthrough to ensure I hadn't forgotten anything. My parents had been conspicuously absent during most of the moving process, but they appeared for this last act. The keys, Dad said, holding out his hand as I descended the stairs with my last bag. I placed my house key in his palm, our fingers never touching. I've documented everything, I said quietly. The rent payments, the improvements, the illegal eviction. Just so you know. His expression flickered with uncertainty for the first time. What's that supposed to mean? It means I won't be taken advantage of, even by family. Especially by family. Mom stepped forward. Alexis, I hope someday you'll understand this was for the best. Megan needed. Stop, I interrupted. I don't want to hear about Megan's needs anymore. You've made your priorities clear. I walked to the front door, then turned back one last time. 4 years I lived here as an adult. I paid rent. I improved your property. I respected this house. And you gave me 48 to leave. I won't forget that. Before either could respond, I walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. The symbolic finality of that action, leaving my childhood home not for college or adventure, but because I'd been expelled, hit me with unexpected force. I sat in my car for several minutes, allowing myself one final moment of grief before driving away. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Megan's car approaching from the opposite direction, no doubt coming to claim her prize. Our eyes met briefly as we passed each other. She looked triumphant. I looked forward. The reality of my situation hit hardest during my first night at Rachel's apartment. Their spare room was tiny, barely fitting a twin mattress on the floor and a small desk where I could work. My clothes remained in suitcases since there was no dresser. The walls were thin enough that I could hear Rachel and Tyler's muffled conversation in the living room, no doubt discussing their unexpected house guest. We're so happy to have you here for as long as you need, Rachel had assured me earlier, helping me set up the makeshift bedroom. My casa es su casa. Her kindness only highlighted what I'd lost, not just housing, but the security of belonging somewhere. Despite paying rent, I'd thought of my parents' house as home. Now I was essentially homeless at 28, crashing on a friend's floor like a college student. Sleep eluded me that first night, and the following day's client meeting was a struggle. I forced myself to focus, to present my designs with professional enthusiasm, but my mind kept drifting to practical concerns. How long could I impose on Rachel? How quickly could I find an affordable apartment? Would my business suffer from this upheaval? "Are you okay?" my client asked halfway through our meeting. "You seem distracted." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just adjusting to a new workspace." That became my standard response in the following weeks. I was fine, just adjusting. The truth was more complicated. I was functioning but barely holding together emotionally. I worked during the day, apartment hunted during evenings, and often cried silently at night when the apartment was quiet. Rachel and Tyler were supportive beyond measure, never making me feel unwelcome despite the obvious imposition. They included me in dinner plans, gave me space when I needed it, offered encouragement during my housing search. Tyler even helped me build a room divider to create more privacy in the cramped space. "Any word from your parents?" Rachel asked about 2 weeks after the move. "Nothing," I replied. "Not even a text to see if I'm alive." And Megan, she sent a group text asking if anyone had seen her blue serving platter. "Apparently, it's missing from the kitchen." The absurdity of this being our only communication made me laugh bitterly. "Your family is something else," Rachel said, shaking her head. "My family." The phrase felt hollow now. I'd lost more than a bedroom. I'd lost my sense of having people who were unconditionally in my corner. That loss affected me in unexpected ways. I became more guarded with clients, less trusting of new acquaintances, hesitant to make plans too far in advance. Why commit when everything could change in 48s? The housing search was another source of stress. Seattle's rental market was brutal, overpriced, competitive, and often requiring perfect credit or income 3 times the rent. My business was doing well but didn't provide the stable income most landlords wanted. After dozens of applications and several rejections, I finally found a studio apartment in an older building about 30 minutes from downtown. The place was tiny and expensive, $1,600 per month for roughly 450 square feet, but it was available immediately and the landlord was willing to accept my freelance income documentation. The day I signed the lease, I felt a curious mix of relief and resentment. I had a place of my own, but it cost twice what I'd paid my parents for a much nicer living situation. Moving in highlighted another painful reality. I had too much furniture for the space. The bedroom set I'd carefully chosen and saved for had to go into storage. A comfortable reading chair wouldn't fit. My desk barely squeezed into the corner by the window. Each item I couldn't accommodate was another small loss connected to my abrupt displacement. Through it all, I maintained my business, somehow meeting deadlines and keeping clients happy despite working from various improvised setups. I even landed a new corporate client, though the victory felt muted by my circumstances. I was surviving but not thriving, getting by but not moving forward. About 6 weeks after the eviction, I finally took Rachel's advice and started seeing a therapist. Dr. Martinez specialized in family trauma, and our first session opened floodgates I hadn't realized were straining. "It sounds like your family's actions triggered some long-standing wounds," she observed after I recounted my story. "I knew I wasn't the favorite," I admitted. "I just didn't know I was disposable." We spent several sessions unpacking the family dynamics that had culminated in my eviction, the established pattern of prioritizing Megan's needs, my parents' emotional distance, my own tendency to seek approval through accommodation. Dr. Martinez helped me see that while the eviction was unjust, my reaction was complicated by years of similar, smaller betrayals. "The opposite of love isn't hate," she told me once. "It's indifference. Your parents' actions show a profound indifference to your well-being, and that's what hurts most." She was right. The casual way they'd appended my life, their lack of concern about where I would go or how I would manage it, wasn't active cruelty, but a complete failure to consider me at all. I was an afterthought in my own family. During these 2 months, I had no contact with my parents or Megan. I removed myself from family group chats, muted their social media accounts, and asked mutual friends not to update me on family news. The separation was both painful and necessary as I worked to rebuild my life and process my feelings. Friends became my lifeline during this period. Beyond Rachel and Tyler's immediate support, my wider circle rallied around me. Former classmates helped move furniture. A client who owned a restaurant invited me for free meals when money was tight before my first rent payment. A neighbor in the new building, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen brought me homemade soup and offered practical advice about the quirks of our building. These kindnesses illuminated an important truth. Family isn't just about blood relations. Community can form anywhere people choose to care for each other. While my biological family had failed me, I was building a chosen family that showed up when it mattered. By the 2-month mark, I had established a new routine. My studio apartment, though small, was becoming home. I decorated with care, maximizing the limited space with clever storage solutions and dual-purpose furniture. My business had not only survived the transition but was growing steadily. I was sleeping better, eating regularly, and had even started dating again, a coffee date with a friend of Tyler's brother that didn't lead anywhere romantic but reminded me life continued beyond trauma. One evening, as I sat at my compact dining table working on designs for a new project, I realized something important. I was okay. Not perfect, not fully healed, but fundamentally okay. The acute pain of betrayal had dulled to a manageable ache. I had a roof over my head, work I loved, people who cared about me. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was mine, built with my own resilience. That night, I sent Brandon Williams an email. I'm ready to move forward with the demand letter we discussed. Let's talk details. It was time to address the final piece of unfinished business with my family. Brandon Williams's office exuded the quiet confidence of established legal practice, leather-bound books lining the walls, discreet awards displayed on polished shelves, comfortable chairs that invited clients to settle in for serious discussions. I sat across from Brandon, nervously adjusting the folder of documents I'd brought. I've reviewed everything you sent over, Brandon said, tapping a thick file on his desk. Your documentation is impressively thorough. 4 years of receipts, I replied. I never throw anything away. That attention to detail will serve us well. He opened the file. Let's go through the specifics of your claim. For the next, we methodically categorized my investments in my parents' property. $5,200 for new kitchen appliances, refrigerator, dishwasher, microwave, range, $8,700 for the bathroom renovation, tile work, fixtures, vanity, plumbing updates, $2,800 for interior painting throughout the main floor, $1,400 for light fixture, $1,300 for carpet cleaning and replacement, and various smaller improvements totaling around $2,600. That brings us to $22,000 in property improvements, Brandon summarized. Plus, they violated state tenant law with the 48 or eviction notice. The statutory minimum is 20 days for month-to-month tenancies, which means you could claim additional damages for illegal eviction. What would that amount to? I asked. We could reasonably ask for 2 months' rent, $1,600, as compensation for the disruption and housing instability they caused. He made a note. That brings the total claim to $23,600. The figure was substantial but fair, exactly what I'd spent plus modest compensation for the illegal eviction. This wasn't about enriching myself. It was about being made whole after significant financial loss. What happens next? I asked. I'll prepare a formal demand letter outlining the claim with supporting documentation. We'll request payment within 30 days and note that if they fail to respond, we're prepared to file in small claims court. Brandon looked at me directly. Are you prepared for how your family might react? I nodded. I've had 2 months to think about this. I'm not doing it to punish them, though God knows they deserve it. I'm doing it because what they did was wrong, and actions should have consequences. Good. Keep that perspective. He made a few more notes. The demand letter will go out tomorrow by certified mail. That gives us documentation of receipt. 3 days later, my phone exploded with notifications. First came a text from my father. We need to talk about this ridiculous letter. Then from my mother. Is this really how you want to handle family matters? Finally, from Megan. Suing your own family. New low, even for you. I didn't respond to any of them. Brandon had advised me to direct all communication through him, and I intended to follow that advice. Still, seeing their messages, the immediate defensiveness, the attempt to shame me for seeking justice confirmed I was making the right decision. Brandon called the next day. Your father contacted me. He's displeased. I imagine so, I said dryly. He claimed the improvements were gifts, not investments, and that you have no legal standing as a tenant since your family. What did you tell him? That the law doesn't recognize a family exemption to tenant rights, and that regular rent payments established a landlord-tenant relationship regardless of blood ties. I also pointed out that we have substantial documentation proving these were investments, not gifts. How did he respond? He said he'd need to consult his attorney and hung up. This pattern continued for nearly 2 weeks. Angry messages from family members that I didn't answer, followed by increasingly desperate attempts to negotiate through Brandon. My father's initial outright dismissal evolved into offers to pay a fraction of what I was owed, always with conditions attached. I would need to sign a non-disclosure agreement, or publicly acknowledge the gift of living in their home, or agree never to discuss family matters with outsiders. Brandon rejected each counteroffer, calmly restating our original demand and the evidence supporting it. Meanwhile, my parents and Megan tried every emotional lever they could think of to make me withdraw the claim. Guilt trips about family loyalty, reminders of past generosity, vague threats about permanent estrangement, and finally, attempts at reconciliation. Your mother called today, Brandon informed me 3 weeks after the demand letter went out. She asked if you would meet with them without lawyers present. She said they miss you. They miss me so much they haven't checked if I'm alive for 2 months, I said, the bitterness surprising me. I thought I'd moved past the raw emotional stage, but apparently not entirely. You don't have to meet with them, Brandon reminded me. We can proceed directly to small claims court when the 30-day period expires next week. I considered my options. Part of me wanted to avoid seeing them altogether, to let the legal process unfold without the emotional complications of a face-to-face meeting. But another part recognized that regardless of the legal outcome, I needed closure, a chance to speak my truth directly to them. I'll meet them, I decided, but on neutral ground, and I want you there. We arranged to meet at Brandon's office the following Saturday. I arrived early, mentally rehearsing what I wanted to say, reminding myself to stay focused on the financial claim rather than reopening emotional wounds. My parents and Megan arrived together, a united front as always. Dad looked older than I remembered, the lines around his mouth deeper. Mom had clearly been crying. Megan wore the same expression she'd had in court during her divorce, the wounded party, unfairly persecuted. Brandon welcomed them professionally and outlined the ground rules. We're here to discuss Alexis's financial claim. This isn't a therapy session or family reunion. I'll intervene if the conversation strays from the legal matter at hand. Dad spoke first, his engineer's precision evident in his prepared statement. Alexis, we understand you're upset about having to move out quickly. We could have handled that better. But these financial demands are excessive and hurtful. The improvements you made were voluntary. We never asked you to renovate or replace anything. You benefited from them, I pointed out. And you're now transferring that benefit to Megan without compensation. We charged you well below market rent for 4 years, Mom countered. That savings more than covers any improvements you made. I paid what you asked, I said evenly. There was never any suggestion that my rent was discounted in exchange for property improvements. Megan jumped in. This is clearly about jealousy. You've always resented that Mom and Dad helped me through law school. Now you're trying to extract an equal payment through this shakedown. This isn't about law school, I said, struggling to maintain composure. This is about $22,000 of my money invested in a property that I was then illegally evicted from with 48's notice. We're your parents, Dad said, as if that settled everything. We let you live with us when you had nowhere else to go after college. This is how you repay that kindness. I repaid your kindness with $38,400 in rent over 4 years and $22,000 in home improvements, I replied. This isn't about gratitude or family feelings. It's about basic fairness. The conversation continued in circles, with my family alternating between dismissing my claim, appealing to family loyalty, and suggesting I was being manipulated by Brandon. I maintained my position, referring to specific documents when they attempted to minimize or deny my contributions to the property. After nearly an hour of unproductive discussion, Brandon intervened. It seems we're not making progress toward resolution. The demand stands, $23,600 to compensate Alexis for property improvements and illegal eviction. The 30-day response period expires on Monday. If payment isn't received, we'll file in small claims court on Tuesday morning. You'd really take your own family to court? Mom asked, tears welling. I met her gaze directly. You gave your own daughter 48's to pack up her life and leave her home. Yes, I would really take you to court. Dad stood abruptly. This meeting is over. We'll be in touch. They filed out, Megan pausing at the door to deliver a final barb. I hope whatever money you get is worth destroying this family. After they left, I sat in silence for several minutes, processing the encounter. It had gone exactly as expected yet was still profoundly disappointing. You held your ground admirably, Brandon said. They tried every emotional manipulation technique in the book. They've had a lifetime to perfect them, I replied wearily. The following Monday, the deadline day, Brandon called with surprising news. They've agreed to pay the full amount. The check is being messengered to my office as we speak. The full amount? No conditions. I could hardly believe it. None. Though your father made it clear this is a business transaction and not an admission of wrongdoing. I laughed despite myself. Of course he did. I didn't learn until later that the sudden capitulation came after Brandon sent one final email Sunday evening, attaching documentation of a consultation with a real estate attorney who specialized in tenant rights. The attorney had confirmed that our case was solid and likely to succeed in court, potentially with additional punitive damages given the circumstances. My parents, always concerned with appearances, had decided that a private settlement was preferable to a public court case where their treatment of their daughter would be entered into official record. It wasn't conscience that motivated them, but image management. Somehow, that knowledge made their payment less like vindication and more like the final confirmation of our broken relationship. The check cleared 2 days later. The money would cover my moving expenses, compensate for the increased rent I was now paying, and still leave enough to rebuild my emergency fund. Financially, I was whole again. Emotionally, the settlement changed nothing, but it did provide a kind of closure. My family had finally been forced to acknowledge, if only through financial compensation, that their actions had real consequences. Megan sent one last text after the payment was made. Hope you're happy with your blood money. Don't expect to be welcome at Thanksgiving. I blocked her number without responding. Some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding. 6 months after receiving the settlement check, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have predicted during those chaotic 48 days of eviction. I'd used part of the money to secure a larger one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood I loved, not as spacious as my old room at my parents' house, but truly mine in a way that space never was. I'd invested in proper office furniture and a fast internet connection, improvements that helped my graphic design business flourish despite the disruption. The financial stability provided by the settlement allowed me to be more selective about clients, taking on projects that excited me creatively rather than accepting whatever came my way to make rent. This shift in focus attracted more interesting work, including a major branding project for a tech startup that became my most significant client. My portfolio expanded, my rates increased, and my professional confidence grew. But the most profound changes weren't financial or professional, they were personal. The family earthquake had forced me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about relationships, support systems, and my own resilience. I hadn't heard from my father since the settlement. Megan remained blocked on all communication channels. But about 4 months after the legal resolution, my mother texted me, "I miss you, can we talk?" I didn't respond immediately. Dr. Martinez and I spent 2 therapy sessions discussing whether reconnecting would be healthy or just reopen wounds. Eventually, I agreed to meet my mother for coffee at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. She looked older when I saw her, more tired than I remembered. We exchanged awkward greetings before sitting with our drinks at a corner table. "How have you been?" she asked, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup. "I'm doing well," I replied honestly. "Work is good. I like my new apartment." "That's good to hear," she hesitated. "We've missed you at family dinners." I resisted the urge to point out that they had explicitly uninvited me from those dinners. Instead, I asked, "How's Dad and Megan?" "Your father is the same, stubborn. He doesn't like to talk about what happened," she sighed. "Megan and David are trying to reconcile. He moved back into the house last month." The irony was almost too perfect. My sister had orchestrated my eviction to claim the family home after her divorce, only to reunite with her ex-husband months later. I wondered if she ever considered the unnecessary pain she'd caused. "I'm sorry for how everything happened," Mom said suddenly. "We should have given you more notice. It wasn't fair." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd received, but it still missed the mark. The issue wasn't just the notice period, it was the casual disregard for my well-being, the clear message that my needs were secondary to Megan's, the violation of both legal and moral obligations. It wasn't fair, I agreed, and it damaged something between us that can't be easily fixed. "We're family," she said, as if that explained everything. "Family forgives." "Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened or going back to how things were," I said carefully. "I'm not holding on to anger, but I'm also not willing to put myself in a position to be hurt like that again." "What does that mean?" "It means if we have a relationship going forward, it needs to be different. I need boundaries and respect. I need acknowledgement that what happened was wrong, not just inconvenient. And I need time. She didn't like this answer. I could see it in her expression, but she nodded. I understand. Can we at least stay in touch? Maybe phone calls to start. We agreed to occasional calls, though I made no promises about holidays or family gatherings. It was a small opening, nothing more. Whether it would lead to reconciliation or just a different kind of distance remained to be seen. As for my father and Megan, I had no contact with either. Sometimes this absence ached like a phantom limb, especially during birthdays or holidays when social media filled with family celebrations. But more often, I felt a sense of peace knowing I had removed sources of consistent pain from my life. The most unexpected outcome of this family fracture was the strengthening of other relationships. Rachel and Tyler remained close friends, but our bond deepened after their generosity during my crisis. My wider circle expanded as I invested more time in friendships that had previously been secondary to family obligations. I joined a book club, started rock climbing with a group from my building, and even began dating someone, Ethan, a web developer I met through a mutual client. Dr. Martinez helped me see that the family upheaval, while traumatic, had freed me from patterns that weren't serving me. Seeking approval from people who consistently withheld it, accepting less than I deserved in relationships, prioritizing others' needs at the expense of my own. Sometimes the most painful experiences are also the most transformative, she observed during one of our last regular sessions. You've built something beautiful from a situation that could have broken you. She was right. The 48 for eviction notice that had seemed like the end of my world had actually been the beginning of a better one I had constructed myself, brick by brick, chose by chose. 1 year to the day after receiving that devastating ultimatum, I threw a housewarming party in my apartment. Friends filled the space with laughter and conversation. Rachel brought her famous guacamole. Ethan helped me hang the last of my artwork. Mrs. Chen from next door brought homemade dumplings and told embarrassing stories about her grandsons. Looking around at these people who had chosen to be in my life, who had supported me without obligation or condition, I realized something profound. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who stays when everyone else leaves. Sometimes it's about who helps you pack your life into boxes in 48. Sometimes it's about who makes space for you at their table when you have nowhere else to go. I had lost my birth family but found my chosen one. And in many ways, that was the greatest gift my parents could have inadvertently given me, the push I needed to discover my own strength, define my own boundaries, and create my own home. Would I have preferred to learn these lessons without the trauma of betrayal and eviction? Absolutely. But I wouldn't trade the person I'd become for the one who existed before that fateful Tuesday morning. That version of me was still seeking validation from people incapable of providing it. This version knew her worth and wasn't afraid to claim it. As my friends gathered around my small dining table for dinner, Ethan raised his glass to Alexis, who turned lemons into the best damn lemonade I've ever tasted. Everyone laughed and clinked glasses. I felt a swell of gratitude so intense it brought tears to my eyes, not for what I had lost, but for what I had found in the aftermath. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a devastating betrayal? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you're going through something similar right now, know that it does get better. The road to healing isn't linear, but it is possible. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories of resilience and growth, and share with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the family you choose is more powerful than the one you're born into.